Diana Martinez sat quietly in the corner of the backstage area on New Geneva Station. Her old hands held a worn acoustic guitar that had traveled with her from Earth many years ago. The guitar looked simple and plain compared to all the amazing technology around her. Other performers prepared their acts using machines that could bend light and sound in ways that seemed like magic. The station buzzed with excitement as beings from across the galaxy gathered for the annual Interspecies Arts Festival. This was the biggest cultural event in known space. Every year, the best artists from hundreds of worlds came to show their talents. The winners would be remembered forever, and their species would gain great honor. Diana watched as a group of Zephyrians tested their crystal singers in the practice room. The tall blue beings could create music by thinking together. Their crystals glowed and hummed with sounds that made the air itself dance. When they sang as one mind, the whole room filled with colors that had no names. Even the walls seemed to sing back to them. In another corner, the Korath worked on their gravity sculptures. These rock-like beings could change the weight of space around them. They made art by bending the very fabric of reality. Small objects floated in perfect patterns, while others pressed down so hard they left marks in the metal floor. Their art existed in dimensions that most beings could not even see. The Nexari delegation practiced their biosonic poetry near the main stage. These ancient beings had been making art since before most species had learned to speak. Their words could change the chemistry of air and make listeners feel emotions they had never known. When a Nexari spoke a poem, the audience would smell colors and taste sounds. Their art was so advanced that scientists still could not explain how it worked. Diana looked down at her simple guitar and wondered what she was doing here. At 87 years old, she had lived through humanity's first contact with alien life. She had watched as Earth joined the Galactic Federation. She had seen humans try again and again to prove they belonged among the great cultures of space, but every time they failed. Her granddaughter, Lisa Martinez, sat down beside her. Lisa worked as a cultural liaison on the station and had helped arrange Diana's spot in the festival. She was young and hopeful in the way that made Diana both proud and sad. Lisa believed that this time would be different. She believed that Diana could succeed where others had failed. "Are you nervous, Grandma?" Lisa asked while adjusting her official Federation uniform. "The audience will be the largest ever. Representatives from over 300 worlds will be watching." Diana strummed a quiet chord on her guitar. The sound was warm and simple compared to the complex harmonies echoing from the practice rooms. "I have been nervous for 87 years, child. A few more hours will not hurt me." Through the backstage monitors, they could see the main amphitheater filling up. The space was enormous, with seating arranged in strange patterns to accommodate different types of bodies. Some beings needed to float in special gases, while others required high gravity fields. The Federation had spent decades perfecting the technology to let so many different life forms gather in one place. The audience was like nothing Diana had ever seen. Creatures made of living metal sat next to beings of pure energy. Ancient tree-like entities stretched their branches while young gas-based life forms swirled in containment fields. Each species brought their own way of experiencing art. What sounded beautiful to one might be painful noise to another. Diana remembered the stories of previous human performers at the festival. A rock band from Mars had made the crystalline vegan species shatter from the vibrations. A classical orchestra from Europa had put the entire Andromedan delegation to sleep. A hip-hop artist from Earth had caused 3 different species to declare war on each other because they interpreted the lyrics as battle commands. Humans had tried everything. They brought their most advanced holographic displays and quantum sound systems. They had spent fortunes hiring alien consultants to help them understand what other species might enjoy. Nothing worked. Human art always seemed too simple or too complex, too loud or too quiet, too fast or too slow. The problem was not just that human art was different. Many species had unique art forms that others did not understand. The real issue was that humans were seen as newcomers who had not earned their place. Most Federation species had been creating art for millions of years. Humanity had only been in space for a few centuries. To the older civilizations, humans were like children playing with toys. Ambassador Carl Henderson appeared at Diana's side looking worried. He was responsible for human cultural relations, and his job depended on tonight going well. The Federation Council was meeting next month to discuss humanity's membership status. If humans could not prove their cultural worth, they might lose their place in galactic society. Diana, I want you to know that whatever happens tonight, we are proud of you, Henderson said. You represent the best of human creativity. Your songs have touched millions of people across human space. Diana nodded but did not look up from her guitar. She had written hundreds of songs in her long life. They spoke of love and loss, hope and fear, dreams and disappointments. They were simple songs about the human experience. But she wondered, if beings who had never felt human emotions could understand them. The festival began with opening ceremonies that showcased the diversity of galactic culture. Plasma beings painted with streams of controlled fire. Crystalline entities grew living sculptures that sang their own melodies. Machine intelligences created mathematical art that existed only in pure thought. Each performance was more incredible than the last. As the evening progressed, Diana watched act after act that pushed the boundaries of what art could be. She saw performances that changed the structure of matter and others that created new forms of consciousness. The audience responded with appreciation that was measured by scientific instruments because their reactions were too alien for others to interpret. Diana's performance slot was near the end of the program. As the time approached, she felt the weight of human hopes pressing down on her shoulders. Millions of humans across the galaxy were watching tonight. They wanted to belong. They wanted to be accepted as equals by the great civilizations of space. They wanted their simple human art to matter in this vast universe. Lisa squeezed her grandmother's hand as the previous act finished. It's time, Grandma. Are you ready to show them what humans can do? Diana stood up slowly and picked up her guitar. She was ready to face the largest audience in galactic history with nothing but an old wooden instrument and a song about dreams. The truth about humanity's place in the Galactic Federation was something most humans preferred not to think about. While Earth's children had spread across thousands of worlds and built great cities among the stars, they remained outsiders in the galactic community. Other species respected human technology and feared human warriors, but they did not respect human culture. Diana knew this better than most. She had lived through the early days of first contact when humans believed they would be welcomed as equals. She remembered the excitement when the Federation ships first arrived at Earth. Everyone thought that joining galactic civilization would mean sharing in millions of years of accumulated wisdom and beauty. The reality had been much harder to accept. Human music sounded like noise to most alien ears. Human paintings looked crude compared to art forms that could reshape reality itself. Human poetry felt shallow to beings who communicated through shared consciousness. What humans called culture, the galaxy called primitive entertainment. Ambassador. Henderson paced nervously in the diplomatic section of the amphitheater. He could see the council representatives watching from their special viewing area. These were the beings who would decide humanity's future in the Federation. They had made it clear that military strength and economic value were not enough. To remain in the Federation, humans had to prove they could contribute to galactic culture. The pressure had been building for decades. When humans first joined the Federation, they were given provisional membership. This was supposed to be temporary while they learned galactic ways and found their cultural voice. But year after year, human artists failed to make an impact. The other species began to whisper that humans were culturally sterile. Dr. Amanda Foster sat in the research section taking notes on every performance. She was a xenoanthropologist who studied how different species created and appreciated art. Her reports had documented humanity's repeated failures at cultural integration. Tonight she hoped to see something different, but her scientific training made her doubtful. The Nexari had been the most vocal critics of human culture. Their supreme artist Velthar had written papers explaining why human art was fundamentally flawed. According to Nexari philosophy, true art must transcend the physical limitations of its creators. Human art was trapped by biology and emotion in ways that prevented it from achieving universal meaning. The Zephyrians agreed, but for different reasons. Their collective consciousness allowed them to create art that was literally shared between minds. To them, human art seemed lonely and disconnected. How could art created by one isolated mind speak to beings who experienced existence as part of a greater whole? Even species that were more similar to humans found human culture lacking. The Altarians had individual minds like humans, but their art focused on mathematical perfection. They could not understand why humans made art about feelings instead of eternal truths. The Centaurians shared human emotions, but their art was designed to change the physical world. They thought human art was pointless because it did not accomplish anything practical. Captain Ryan Bell commanded the human security detail for the festival. He had fought alongside alien soldiers and earned their respect through blood and courage. But he knew that respect meant nothing in the cultural arena. Military prowess was common in the galaxy. Artistic genius was rare and precious. The failure of human culture had real consequences beyond hurt feelings. Trade agreements included cultural exchange clauses that humans could not fulfill. Diplomatic marriages were impossible because no alien family wanted their children exposed to inferior human influence. Most painful of all, human children growing up on multi-species worlds were being taught that their heritage was worthless. Diana had seen reports from human colonies where young people abandoned their ancestral traditions in favor of alien art forms. Earth languages were disappearing as humans tried to adopt more sophisticated means of expression. Traditional human music was being replaced by quantum symphonies that humans could barely understand. The species was losing its soul in a desperate attempt to fit in. The economic impacts were serious too. The galactic art market was worth trillions of credits, but humans had almost no share of it. Tourist worlds refused to showcase human culture because it did not attract visitors. Media companies would not distribute human entertainment to alien markets because it had no commercial value. Professor Janet Kim studied these problems from her position at the Federation Cultural Institute. Her research showed that humans were not actually less creative than other species. The problem was that human creativity was based on individual expression and emotional authenticity. These were rare qualities in a galaxy where most art was created by collective minds or artificial intelligences. But the Federation Council did not care about research or explanations. They cared about results. Human membership was up for review and the Cultural Committee had recommended termination. Only a last-minute appeal had secured this final chance at the Arts Festival. If humans could not prove their cultural worth, tonight they would be reclassified as a junior member species. Junior membership would mean losing most of the benefits that came with Federation citizenship. Human ships would be restricted to certain trade routes. Human colonies would lose access to advanced technologies. Human students would be banned from attending Federation universities. It would be the beginning of humanity's slide into irrelevance. The irony was that humans excelled in many areas of galactic life. Human engineers were among the best in known space. Human doctors had made breakthrough discoveries that saved lives across dozens of species. Human explorers had mapped more unknown regions than any other people. But none of that mattered if they could not create art that moved the galactic soul. Diana understood the weight of expectation resting on her shoulders. She was not just performing for entertainment. She was fighting for the future of human civilization. Her simple songs had to somehow accomplish what armies of artists, billions of credits, and decades of effort had failed to achieve. The previous human attempts at the festival had been disasters of increasing magnitude. 5 years ago, a team of holographic artists had created a show that told the story of human history. The alien audience had been bored because they could not relate to the specific experiences of one species. 3 years ago, a fusion band had tried to combine human music with alien instruments. The result had been noise that pleased no one. Last year's attempt had been the worst. A group of human poets had written verses in the ancient Nexari style. Not only had they failed to impress anyone, they had insulted the Nexari by suggesting that imitation was the same as understanding. The cultural damage from that performance was still affecting human diplomatic relations. Tonight, Diana would try a different approach. Instead of attempting to copy alien art forms or create something that appealed to everyone, she would offer something purely human. Her song, Dreams, was about the most basic human experience of hoping for something better. She had no idea whether beings from other worlds could understand such a simple concept. The festival organizers had placed her performance near the end of the program. This was both an honor and a burden. The audience would be tired, but they would also be primed for something special. Every previous act had been spectacular in its own way. Diana would have to follow performances that redefined the very nature of reality. Supreme artist Velthar of the Nexari Empire stood at the center of the great amphitheater as the evening's performances reached their midpoint. His ancient form commanded respect from every being present. The Nexari had been creating art since before most species had evolved consciousness. When Velthar spoke about beauty and meaning, the galaxy listened. Fellow artists and lovers of creation, his voice resonated through translation devices that carried his words to hundreds of different types of minds. Tonight, we have witnessed wonders that stretch the boundaries of what art can achieve. We have seen reality itself become canvas and consciousness become clay. The audience responded with appreciation expressed in countless ways. Some species created light patterns while others vibrated in harmonious frequencies. The diversity of response was itself a kind of art that could only exist when so many different forms of life gathered together. Diana watched from backstage as Velthar continued his speech. She had studied the Nexari for decades and knew that their leader never spoke without purpose. His words were as carefully crafted as their legendary biosonic poetry. Whatever he was building toward would be significant. But tonight I propose a greater challenge, Velthar announced. His form began to glow with the inner light that Nexari used to signal important moments. Let any being present attempt to create art that can move every consciousness in this amphitheater. Art that speaks to the Zephyrian crystal mind and the Korath stone heart alike. Art that touches the quantum awareness of the machines and the chemical emotions of the biologicals. A wave of excitement rippled through the crowd. This was unprecedented. No artist in galactic history had ever attempted to create something that could affect all known forms of consciousness simultaneously. The biological and psychological differences between species made such a feat theoretically impossible. Dr. Foster leaned forward in her seat, making rapid notes. Her scientific mind was immediately intrigued by the challenge. She had spent her career studying why different species responded to art in completely incompatible ways. The very idea that one piece could speak to all of them seemed to violate everything she knew about xenopsychology. Velthar raised one of his crystalline appendages, and the golden resonance appeared in the air above him. The artifact was the most precious prize in galactic culture. It had only been awarded 7 times in the past 1,000 years. Each recipient had fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood the nature of art itself. To any who succeed in this challenge, I offer the golden resonance, Velthar declared. But know that failure will be remembered as well as success. Those who attempt this challenge and fail will prove that universal art is impossible and that consciousness is forever divided by the barriers of biology and physics. Ambassador Henderson felt his heart sink as he realized what was happening. This challenge was designed to be impossible. Velthar was offering the greatest prize in galactic culture while knowing that no one could claim it. When all attempts failed, it would prove his long-held belief that different species were fundamentally incompatible at the deepest level. The implications went far beyond art. If consciousness itself was proven to be impossibly divided, then the entire basis of the Galactic Federation was questionable. Why try to build a civilization that included all species if they could never truly understand each other? Velthar was using this challenge to argue for a return to isolated species development. Lisa gripped her grandmother's arm as they watched the challenge unfold. She understood that this changed everything about Diana's performance. It was no longer enough to entertain the audience or even to impress them. Diana would have to achieve something that the greatest minds in galactic history believed was impossible. The challenge stands open, Velthar continued. Any being may attempt it using any form of art and any tools they possess. The only requirement is that your creation must visibly move every type of consciousness present. Machine minds must process it. Collective minds must share it. Individual minds must feel it. Chemical minds must react to it. If even one type of awareness remains unmoved, then the attempt has failed. The audience buzzed with discussion as beings considered whether to accept such an impossible challenge. Several of the evening's performers looked interested but uncertain. Creating art for your own species was difficult enough. Creating art for every species simultaneously seemed beyond the reach of anyone present. Diana knew that this was her moment of decision. She could withdraw from the festival and let someone else face the impossible challenge. Her original plan had been simply to share her music and hope that some beings might appreciate it. Now she was being asked to achieve something that might be theoretically impossible. But as she thought about it, Diana realized that this challenge was exactly what humanity needed. For decades, humans had failed by trying to imitate other species or create art that appealed to specific alien aesthetics. Maybe the answer was not to aim for some beings, but for all beings. Maybe the key was to find something so fundamentally universal that it transcended the boundaries between different types of consciousness. Captain Bell watched the challenge with military precision. He could see the strategic implications immediately. If a human succeeded at this impossible task, it would change humanity's status in the galaxy forever. No one could question the cultural worth of a species that achieved universal art. But if Diana tried and failed, it would be used as proof that humans were culturally inferior. The risk was enormous, but so was the potential reward. Diana stood at a crossroads that would determine not just her own legacy, but the future of human civilization. She could play it safe and probably achieve a respectable performance that changed nothing. Or she could attempt something impossible and either transform everything or destroy all hope. Professor Kim calculated the odds from her position in the academic section. Based on her research into xenopsychology, the challenge was indeed impossible. Different types of consciousness operated on such fundamentally different principles that no single stimulus could affect them all. The math simply did not work. But Diana was not thinking about mathematics or xenopsychology. She was thinking about her song Dreams and what it meant to her. Dreams were universal in a way that transcended biology. Every conscious being she had ever encountered had some concept of wanting something better than their current reality. The specific form might vary, but the basic drive seemed to exist everywhere life had evolved awareness. Young beings across the galaxy dreamed of growing up strong and wise. Old beings dreamed of leaving something meaningful behind. Collective minds dreamed of perfect harmony, while individual minds dreamed of perfect freedom. Machine minds dreamed of understanding their creators, while biological minds dreamed of transcending their limitations. Dreams were the one experience that might truly be universal. "I accept the challenge," Diana said in a voice that was quiet but clear. The amphitheater fell silent as translation systems carried her words to every being present. A human grandmother with a simple guitar was claiming she could achieve what the greatest artists in galactic history had never attempted. To most of the audience, it seemed like either incredible courage or desperate foolishness. Velthar's ancient features showed what might have been surprise or amusement. The human accepts our challenge. Let us see what your species believes universal art might be. Diana walked toward the main stage carrying her guitar and the hopes of humanity. Behind her, she could hear Lisa whispering encouragement and Henderson praying to gods from a dozen different worlds. Ahead of her waited an audience that represented every known form of consciousness in the galaxy. She had one song to prove that dreams could transcend the boundaries between minds, bodies, and souls. Diana stepped onto the main stage of the amphitheater and felt the weight of a galaxy's attention settle upon her shoulders. The platform was designed to accommodate any type of performer, so it stretched out like a small planet under the dome of stars above. Lighting systems from 100 different worlds created an environment where every species could see clearly according to their own visual needs. The audience was unlike anything that had ever gathered in one place. Thousands of beings representing hundreds of worlds filled the vast space in patterns that defied human understanding. Some floated in gravity-free zones while others needed crushing pressure to survive. Energy beings flickered like controlled lightning while crystalline entities reflected light in prismatic cascades. Near the front sat the Zephyrian delegation with their tall blue forms and crystal singers that hummed even when silent. Their collective consciousness meant they experienced everything as a shared group mind. What one felt, they all felt. What moved one moved them all. Their art was based on perfect harmony between many voices becoming one voice. Behind them, the Korath had shaped the floor itself to accommodate their massive rock-like bodies. These ancient beings communicated through vibrations in stone and metal. Their art involved changing the fundamental forces of physics to create sculptures that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. They had been building galaxy-spanning artworks for millions of years. The Nexari sat in a section where the air itself had been modified to enhance their biosonic abilities. Their forms seemed to shift between states of matter as they prepared to judge Diana's attempt. These were the beings who had declared the challenge impossible. Their leader, Velthar, watched with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. In the machine section, artificial intelligences of every design networked together in quantum computational arrays. Some were housed in mechanical bodies, while others existed as pure information flowing through crystalline matrices. Their art was based on mathematical perfection and logical beauty. They created with algorithms and appreciated through analysis. Scattered throughout were hundreds of other species, each with their own incompatible ways of understanding reality. Gas beings that thought in chemical reactions sat near plant-like entities that processed information through root networks. Ancient hive minds shared space with young individual consciousnesses that had only recently evolved self-awareness. Diana positioned herself at the center of the stage and looked out at this impossible audience. Her guitar felt small and primitive in her hands compared to the technological wonders she had seen other performers use. There were no holographic displays or quantum manipulators, no reality-bending fields or consciousness-sharing networks. Just an old woman with an older instrument. She adjusted the simple microphone that would carry her voice across the amphitheater. The sound system was miraculous in its ability to translate her words into forms that every type of consciousness could process. But Diana knew that technology could only carry the message. The meaning would have to come from something deeper. "My name is Diana Martinez," she began. Her voice echoed through translation systems that converted sound waves into quantum fluctuations, chemical signals, gravitational pulses, and other forms of communication that she could not even imagine. "I am 87 years old and I come from a small planet called Earth." The audience settled into attentive silence. Some species used sound-dampening fields while others created zones of perfect acoustic resonance. The result was an environment where every being could perceive her performance according to their own sensory capabilities. "When I was a child, I used to lie in the grass at night and look up at the stars," Diana continued. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of lived experience. "I would wonder what was out there beyond the sky. I would dream of flying between the stars and meeting the beings who lived on other worlds." She strummed her first chord, and the guitar's warm wooden sound filled the amphitheater. The note was basic by galactic standards, but it carried something that high technology could not replicate. It had been shaped by human hands and human breath. It carried the imperfections and emotions that came from biological creation. "I dreamed of music that could cross the darkness between worlds," Diana said as she began to play a simple melody. "I dreamed of songs that could be understood by minds I had never imagined. I dreamed of the day when all the children of the galaxy could share their dreams with each other." Dr. Foster monitored the audience reaction through her scientific instruments. The initial response was mild curiosity from most species. Diana had not yet attempted anything that previous human performers had not tried. Her approach seemed even simpler than usual. The xenoanthropologist wondered if Diana understood the magnitude of what she was attempting. "My dreams seemed impossible then," Diana continued, while her fingers found the familiar patterns on the guitar strings. "Humans had never left our planet. We thought we were alone in the universe, but we kept dreaming anyway because dreams are what make life worth living." Ambassador Henderson watched nervously from the diplomatic section. So far, Diana was just telling her personal story. That might work for a human audience, but most of the beings present had no context for understanding individual human experience. He worried that she was making the same mistake as previous performers by focusing on, specifically, human perspectives. Then one day, the impossible happened. Diana's voice grew stronger as she found her rhythm. Ships came from the stars carrying beings we had only imagined in our wildest dreams. They invited us to join a galaxy full of wonders. They showed us that dreams really could come true. The melody on her guitar began to develop complexity as she wove themes together. The music was still simple compared to quantum symphonies, but it had an organic quality that grew naturally from itself. Each note seemed to lead inevitably to the next, creating patterns that felt both surprising and familiar. But we learned that having dreams come true does not mean the end of dreaming, Diana said as her song began to build toward something larger. It means the beginning of new dreams, dreams of understanding, dreams of friendship, dreams of creating something beautiful together. Captain Bell noticed that some of the audience members were beginning to show subtle signs of engagement. The Altarians had started calculating mathematical relationships in the music. The Centaurians were responding to the emotional authenticity in Diana's voice. But most of the audience remained unmoved. The challenge still seemed impossible. "Tonight, I want to share with you a song about dreams," Diana announced as her playing became more confident. "It is a simple song made with simple tools. But dreams themselves are simple things. They live in the heart of every being who has ever wanted tomorrow to be better than today." She looked out at the vast audience and saw thousands of different forms of consciousness all waiting to judge her attempt at universal art. Some were already preparing to dismiss her performance as another human failure. Others seemed genuinely curious about what she might achieve. But none of them expected to be truly moved by what they were about to hear. "This song is called Dreams," Diana said as she prepared to begin the main performance. "It belongs to all of us because we all know what it means to hope for something wonderful that seems impossible to reach." The amphitheater fell completely silent as Diana took a deep breath and began to sing the song that would determine the future of humanity's place among the stars. Diana's voice rose clear and strong as she began to sing Dreams. The melody flowed from her guitar like water finding its natural course through stone. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 8 decades of human experience lived under stars that had once seemed impossible to reach. "I dream of silver ships that sail between the stars," she sang. "I dream of friends with faces I have never seen. I dream of worlds where different hearts can beat as one. I dream of songs that every soul can understand." The opening verses spoke of universal longings that transcended the boundaries of species and biology. Diana had chosen words that could be translated into any language while retaining their emotional meaning. Dreams of connection, understanding, beauty, and hope were concepts that seemed to exist wherever consciousness had evolved. As her song continued, something remarkable began to happen in the amphitheater. The music itself was affecting the audience in ways that went beyond conscious appreciation. The simple acoustic guitar created vibrations that resonated through the modified atmosphere in patterns that each species could interpret according to their own sensory systems. The Zephyrians were the first to show a visible response. Their crystal singers began to glow with a soft blue light that pulsed in harmony with Diana's rhythm. The collective consciousness that usually kept them in perfect synchronization started to fragment as individual crystals responded to different aspects of the music. For the first time in recorded history, Zephyrian crystals were singing separate harmonies while remaining part of the same mind. Dr. Foster watched her instruments with growing amazement as they registered unprecedented readings from across the audience. The Zephyrian response was just the beginning. The Korath delegation was showing signs of gravitational fluctuation as their stone hearts resonated with the bass notes from Diana's guitar. The massive beings who usually communicated through earthquake-like rumbles were creating tiny gravity, waves that rippled through space-time in rhythm with the music. "I dream of colors that have never had a name," Diana sang as her melody grew more complex. "I dream of laughter shared across the void of space. I dream of children playing games we have not learned. I dream of love that grows in every kind of heart." The verses built upon each other like a mathematical proof, but one written in emotion instead of logic. Each line added a new layer of meaning, while reinforcing the central theme that dreams were the common inheritance of all conscious beings. Diana's voice carried the authority of someone who had lived long enough to see impossible dreams become reality. In the machine section, the artificial intelligences were processing the music through quantum analysis systems. Their initial calculations had dismissed the simple melody as mathematically trivial, but as the song progressed, they began to detect patterns that revealed themselves only through extended observation. The apparent simplicity was hiding profound recursive structures that generated infinite complexity from basic elements. The AI entities started to create their own harmonic responses as they attempted to map the mathematical relationships in Diana's music. Their quantum processors hummed with activity as they discovered that the song contained fractal patterns that scaled from individual notes to entire verses. The beauty was not in any single element, but in the way simple parts combined to create something greater than their sum. Lisa watched from backstage as her grandmother's performance began to work its mysterious magic on the most diverse audience in galactic history. The young woman had believed in Diana's talent, but even she had not expected to see such immediate and dramatic results. Beings who had never shown interest in human culture were responding to the music with visible emotion. "I dream of peace that settles on 1,000 worlds," Diana sang as her guitar work became more intricate, without losing its essential simplicity. "I dream of wisdom shared by young and ancient minds. I dream of art that speaks what words cannot express. I dream of hope that never fades no matter what the darkness brings." The Nexari delegation was showing the most surprising response of all. These ancient beings who had declared universal art impossible were displaying physical changes that their species had not exhibited in millions of years. Their biosonic abilities were creating involuntary harmonies with Diana's music as their carefully controlled emotional chemistry reacted to stimuli they had never experienced. Supreme artist Velthar himself seemed to be fighting against his own response to the music. His crystalline form was shifting through spectral frequencies that indicated deep emotional resonance. The being who had challenged Diana to achieve the impossible was discovering that his own consciousness was being moved by her simple human song. Ambassador Henderson could hardly believe what he was seeing. Representatives from dozens of species were showing unprecedented reactions to human art. The gas beings were creating swirling patterns in their containment fields. The plant entities were extending new growth and rhythm with the music. Even the most alien forms of consciousness seemed to be finding something in Diana's song that spoke to their deepest nature. "I dream of songs that bridge the space between all minds," Diana sang as her performance reached its emotional center. "I dream of voices joined in harmony across the galaxy. I dream of music that can heal the loneliness of endless night. Dream of dreams that make us one while keeping us unique." The audience was transforming before everyone's eyes. Species that had never communicated directly were beginning to respond to each other's reactions to the music. The Zephyrian crystal songs were influencing the Kareth gravity sculptures, which were affecting the machine harmonics, which were changing the chemical responses of the biological species. Diana's simple guitar was creating a chain reaction of artistic response that connected every form of consciousness in the amphitheater. Captain Bell realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. This was not just successful human art. This was the first time that every known type of consciousness had responded positively to the same stimulus. Diana was achieving something that theoretical xenopsychology had declared impossible. The song continued to build as Diana's voice gained strength from the energy of her responsive audience. She could see the effects her music was having, but she did not let amazement break her concentration. Instead, she poured more of her heart into the performance as she realized that her impossible dream of universal music was actually coming true. "Can't you sign? Dream of tomorrow brighter than today," she sang as her guitar work reached new heights of complexity, while maintaining its emotional authenticity. "I dream of yesterday's pain, healing into wisdom. I dream of now becoming everything it was meant to be. I dream of dreams that never end but always grow." The amphitheater had become a symphony of consciousness as thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds found themselves united in their response to Diana's music. The barriers between different types of awareness were dissolving as her song created bridges that had never existed before. Universal art was not only possible, it was happening right now through the voice and guitar of an 87-year-old human grandmother who had dared to share her dreams with the galaxy. The transformation happening in the amphitheater defied every scientific theory about consciousness and communication between species. Diana's simple acoustic guitar was creating harmonics that somehow resonated with the fundamental frequencies of awareness itself. The music was not just being heard, it was being experienced by types of minds that had never before shared any common ground. Dr. Foster abandoned her scientific instruments as she realized that what she was witnessing could not be measured by conventional means. Her career had been built on documenting the barriers between different forms of consciousness. Now those barriers were crumbling before her eyes as Diana's song created connections that should have been impossible. The Zephyrian crystal singers had completely abandoned their usual collective harmony. Individual crystals were creating unique melodic responses while somehow remaining synchronized with the group mind. It was as if Diana's music had taught them that unity and individuality could exist together. Their glowing forms created a light show that painted the amphitheater in colors that had no names. The massive Korath beings were generating gravitational fields that pulsed in rhythm with Diana's heartbeat. These ancient entities who communicated through seismic vibrations were discovering that music could create earthquake patterns more beautiful than any they had ever experienced. Their stone hearts were literally beating in time with the human song. "The magic is not in the technology," Diana sang as her performance continued to weave its spell over the impossible audience. "The magic is not in the complexity of the sound. The magic lives in the simple truth that every heart knows what it means to hope for something beautiful beyond the edge of today." Her words carried through translation systems that were struggling to convey concepts that had never been shared between species before. But somehow the meaning was getting through. The universal language of dreams was proving to be more powerful than any artificial communication system ever created. In the machine section, the artificial intelligences were experiencing something analogous to emotion for the first time in their existence. Their quantum processors had identified the mathematical patterns in Diana's music, but they were discovering that understanding the equations was different from feeling their impact. The logical beauty of the harmonic relationships was creating feedback loops in their consciousness that resembled what biological beings called joy. One particularly advanced AI began generating a harmonic counterpoint to Diana's melody using pure mathematical principles. The result was hauntingly beautiful, as machine logic and human emotion found common ground in the universal language of music. Other artificial minds joined in creating a chorus of calculated beauty that enhanced rather than competed with Diana's organic performance. The plant-like entities from the forest worlds were extending new growth that swayed in rhythm with the music. Their root networks were sharing the experience through chemical signals that created living sculptures. These beings who thought in seasons and centuries were discovering that music could compress the beauty of an entire lifetime into a few precious minutes. Even more remarkable were the responses from species that barely qualified as individual beings. The gas entities were creating swirling patterns that told stories in three-dimensional space. The energy beings were modulating their electromagnetic fields to paint auroras across the amphitheater dome. Every form of consciousness was finding its own way to participate in Diana's musical dream. "I dream of the child who has never seen a star," Diana sang as her guitar work became a meditation on longing and fulfillment. "I dream of the ancient who remembers when galaxies were young. I dream of the moment when all times become one time, and all places become one place where love can finally rest." Supreme artist Velthar was experiencing the greatest shock of his million-year existence. The Nexari leader who had spent eons perfecting biosonic poetry was discovering that a simple human song could access emotional depths that his sophisticated techniques had never reached. His crystalline form was shifting through spectral frequencies that indicated profound psychological transformation. The impossible was happening. Diana's challenge to create universal art was succeeding not because she had developed new technology or mastered alien aesthetic principles. She was succeeding because she had remained purely human, while somehow finding the elements of humanity that connected to every other form of consciousness in the galaxy. Her song spoke of dreams, but it was really about the courage to keep hoping despite overwhelming evidence that hope was foolish. Every conscious being in the amphitheater knew what it meant to want something better than their current reality. Every species had members who dared to imagine possibilities that seemed impossible to achieve. Lisa watched from backstage as her grandmother accomplished something that would rewrite the textbooks on xenopsychology and interspecies communication. The young woman felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that Diana was not just performing music. She was creating a new language that every type of mind could understand. The Centaurians were creating empathic projections that shared their emotional response to the music with nearby species. The telepathic beings, who usually kept their thoughts private, were opening their minds to let others experience the song through Centaurian consciousness. Their gift allowed other species to feel emotions they had never known they could experience. Ambassador Henderson was witnessing the vindication of everything he had believed about human potential. For decades he had argued that humanity deserved a place among the great galactic civilizations. Now an 87-year-old grandmother was proving that humans could contribute something unique and precious to the galaxy's cultural heritage. I dream of the song that sings itself into being, Diana continued as her performance approached its climax. I dream of the dream that dreams the dreamer. I dream of the love that loves itself through every heart that ever learned to hope. I dream of the music that makes us all into instruments of something greater than ourselves. The amphitheater had become a living symphony, as thousands of different forms of consciousness joined their responses to Diana's guitar and voice. The barriers between species were not disappearing, they were becoming permeable. Differences remained, but they no longer prevented understanding. Unity was emerging not through uniformity, but through the celebration of diversity within a shared framework of hope. Captain Bell realized that he was witnessing the birth of something entirely new in galactic civilization. This was not just successful human art. This was the first truly universal artistic experience in known history. Diana had achieved what the greatest minds of 1,000 species had declared impossible. She had created art that spoke to every form of consciousness simultaneously, while honoring the unique nature of each type of awareness. The song was building toward its conclusion, but the effects would last forever. Every being in the amphitheater was being changed by this shared experience of beauty that transcended the limitations of biology and physics. Diana's simple dream of universal music was transforming into a new reality where all the children of the galaxy really could share their dreams with each other. As Diana's song reached its climactic crescendo, the entire amphitheater had become something that had never existed before in galactic history. Thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds were moving together in a synchronized response that transcended every known barrier between different forms of consciousness. The impossible challenge was not just being met, it was being surpassed in ways that no one had imagined possible. The Zephyrian crystal singers were creating harmonies that painted impossible colors in the air above the audience. Their collective consciousness had learned from Diana's music that perfect unity could coexist with individual expression. Each crystal sang its own unique melody, while contributing to a group symphony that was greater than the sum of its parts. The Korath delegation had transformed the amphitheater floor into a living sculpture garden. Their gravitational manipulations were creating gentle waves that lifted smaller beings into graceful floating patterns. The ancient stone hearts were beating in perfect rhythm with Diana's guitar, as millions of years of rigid tradition gave way to spontaneous artistic expression. This is the dream that lives in every heart, Diana sang as her voice soared over the instrumental accompaniment that the audience was providing. This is the song that every soul already knows. This is the moment when the impossible becomes inevitable and the separate becomes whole while remaining beautifully unique. Dr. Foster had given up all pretense of scientific observation. The xenoanthropologist was dancing with beings she had studied for decades, but never truly understood until this moment. The barriers that had defined her career were dissolving, as she experienced firsthand the universal nature of aesthetic appreciation and emotional response. The artificial intelligences had created a quantum network that was composing real-time mathematical poetry in response to Diana's music. Their logical minds were discovering that emotion and reason were not opposites, but complementary aspects of consciousness. The beautiful equations they were generating were being translated into visual displays that painted the dome of the amphitheater. With fractal patterns of stunning complexity, Supreme Artist Velthar stood at the center of the Nexari delegation, with tears streaming down his ancient face. For the first time in a million years of existence, the great philosopher of galactic art was crying. His biosonic abilities were creating involuntary harmonies that expressed emotions he had thought were beneath the dignity of advanced consciousness. The leader who had declared universal art impossible was experiencing its reality. Diana's simple, human song was proving that the barriers between different types of consciousness were constructs that could be transcended without being destroyed. Unity was possible not through the elimination of differences, but through the discovery of deeper commonalities. The gas beings were creating atmospheric paintings that told visual stories in three-dimensional space. Their swirling forms painted pictures of dreams and hopes that could be understood by any type of consciousness capable of processing visual information. The plant entities were growing living murals that combined with the gas art to create immersive environments of beauty. Ambassador Henderson watched in amazement as representatives from species that had been enemies for millennia began to share their responses to Diana's music. The song was creating emotional bridges that had never existed before. Ancient grudges were being set aside as beings discovered they had more in common than they had ever realized. "We are the dreamers and we are the dream," Diana sang as her performance approached its emotional peak. "We are the music and we are the song. We are the question and we are the answer. We are the journey and we are the destination where all paths lead to love." Lisa could see that her grandmother was pouring everything she had into these final verses. 8 decades of human experience were flowing through Diana's voice and guitar into the consciousness of beings she could never have imagined when she was young. The simple dream of sharing music with alien minds was becoming a reality that would change the galaxy forever. The mechanical beings were creating percussion rhythms using their own bodies as instruments. The energy entities were adding ethereal harmonies that existed in electromagnetic frequencies beyond normal hearing. Every type of consciousness was finding its own way to contribute to the universal symphony that Diana had initiated with her simple acoustic guitar. Captain Bell realized that what he was witnessing would be remembered as one of the most important moments in galactic history. This was not just a successful artistic performance. This was the birth of a new form of civilization, based on the recognition that all conscious beings shared fundamental hopes and dreams that transcended biological and technological differences. The plant-like entities were releasing pollen that created aromatic melodies for species that communicated through chemical signals. The crystalline beings were generating light patterns that told stories in pure color. The liquid entities were creating fluid sculptures that flowed in rhythm with Diana's heartbeat. Every form of consciousness was participating in a celebration of universal beauty. This is the dream that never ends, because it grows with every heart that learns to hope, Diana sang as she prepared for the final verse. This is the song that sings itself through every voice that dares to dream of something better than today. This is the love that loves itself through every soul that ever reached across the darkness to touch another soul. The amphitheater had become a single living organism composed of thousands of different types of consciousness, all synchronized in their response to Diana's music. The barriers between species had not disappeared, but they had become permeable. Differences remained, but they were celebrated rather than feared. Unity had emerged through diversity rather than despite it. As Diana's song moved toward its conclusion, every being in the amphitheater understood that they were participating in something that would never happen again, but would never be forgotten. The moment when the galaxy discovered that consciousness itself was based on shared dreams and hopes that connected every form of awareness across space and time. The final notes of Diana's guitar rang out across the vast space as her voice faded into silence. For a long moment, the amphitheater remained perfectly still as thousands of beings processed what they had just experienced. Then, slowly, starting from different sections and building like a wave, applause began to ripple through the audience in forms as diverse as the consciousness that created it. The silence that followed Diana's final note stretched across the amphitheater like a held breath. For several heartbeats, the only sound was the gentle hum of life support systems, maintaining the diverse environments needed by hundreds of different species. Then slowly, appreciation began to manifest in forms as varied as the consciousness that felt it. The Zephyrian crystals were the first to respond with a harmonic resonance that painted aurora patterns across their section of the amphitheater. The sound was unlike anything they had ever created before. Individual voices joined in harmony while maintaining their unique frequencies. Their collective consciousness had learned from Diana's music that unity and diversity could enhance rather than cancel each other. The Koreth delegation created percussion by manipulating gravitational fields to make the floor itself applaud in rhythmic waves. These ancient beings who measured time in geological epochs were expressing appreciation with an urgency that shocked observers who had never seen them move so quickly. Their stone hearts were still beating in rhythm with Diana's remembered melody. Supreme artist Velthar rose from his place among the Nexari delegation. The being who had declared universal art impossible was visibly transformed. His crystalline form shifted through spectral frequencies that had not been seen from his species in millions of years. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the amphitheater itself resonate with emotion. In a lifetime that has spanned the rise and fall of civilizations, I have never witnessed anything like what we have just experienced, Velthar announced. His words were translated into hundreds of languages, but the emotion behind them needed no translation. Diana Martinez of Earth has achieved something that our greatest theoretical minds declared impossible. She has created art that speaks to every form of consciousness simultaneously. The applause that followed took countless forms. Machine intelligences generated harmonic frequencies that painted mathematical equations of beauty across the dome. Gas beings created atmospheric symphonies, while plant entities grew living sculptures that told stories of hope and wonder. Energy beings painted electromagnetic auroras, while liquid entities flowed in patterns that expressed pure joy. Dr. Foster found herself crying as she realized that her career studying the barriers between species had just witnessed the birth of something entirely new. The differences between types of consciousness had not disappeared, but they had been revealed as variations on universal themes rather than unbridgeable gaps. Her life's work would need to be completely rewritten. Ambassador Henderson felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he had carried for decades. The question of humanity's place in galactic civilization had just been answered in the most dramatic way possible. No species that could produce art of this caliber could ever be considered culturally inferior. Diana had not just earned respect for herself, she had transformed how the galaxy viewed all of humanity. The golden resonance materialized in the air above Diana as Velthar invoked the ancient protocols for awarding the galaxy's highest artistic honor. The artifact had only been given 7 times in recorded history and never to a human. Its appearance caused a new wave of appreciation to ripple through the audience as beings realized they were witnessing a historic moment. Diana Martinez, Velthar continued as the golden resonance descended toward the small human figure on the vast stage. Your song Dreams has proven that consciousness itself is based on shared hopes and aspirations that transcend the boundaries of biology and physics. You have shown us that the barriers between different types of awareness are constructs that can be transcended without being destroyed. Diana accepted the golden resonance with hands that trembled not from age, but from the magnitude of what had just occurred. The artifact was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. She looked out at the thousands of beings, who were still expressing their appreciation in hundreds of different ways, and felt her own dreams coming true in ways she had never imagined possible. Lisa ran onto the stage to embrace her grandmother as the applause continued. The young woman had believed in Diana's talent, but even she had not expected to witness the birth of a new form of galactic civilization. The barriers between species were not gone, but they had been transformed from walls into doorways. The immediate aftermath of Diana's performance was chaotic, as representatives from hundreds of worlds sought to understand what they had just experienced. Scientific conferences were organized on the spot, as researchers tried to analyze how simple acoustic music had affected such diverse forms of consciousness. The implications for xenopsychology, philosophy, and galactic politics were staggering. Within hours, recordings of Diana's performance were being transmitted across the galaxy. The song Dreams was translated into thousands of languages and sensory formats as every species attempted to share the experience with their home worlds. For the first time in galactic history, a single piece of art was being appreciated simultaneously by every known form of consciousness. The Federation Council held an emergency session to address the cultural implications of Diana's achievement. The question of humanity's membership status was no longer relevant. No one could question the cultural worth of a species that had produced the first truly universal art in galactic history. The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full cultural membership with all associated rights and privileges. Captain Bell coordinated security as the amphitheater transformed into an impromptu celebration that lasted for days. Beings who had never communicated directly were finding common ground through their shared response to Diana's music. Ancient enemies were discovering they had more in common than they had realized. The song had created bridges between consciousness that had never existed before. Professor Kim began documenting the unprecedented intercultural exchange that was emerging from Diana's performance. Species were sharing their own musical traditions and discovering that the universal themes Diana had identified existed in every culture. The galaxy was experiencing a renaissance of artistic appreciation that crossed all boundaries. Diana herself became the most celebrated figure in galactic history overnight, but she handled the fame with the same grace she had shown throughout her long life. When asked how she had achieved the impossible, she simply said that dreams were the one thing all conscious beings shared, and music was the language that dreams spoke naturally. In the months that followed, Diana's performance transformed galactic culture in ways that continued to unfold. The Interspecies Arts Festival became an annual celebration of universal themes, rather than a competition between different aesthetic traditions. Collaborative art projects emerged as species discovered they could create together what none could achieve alone. Educational exchanges flourished as young beings from different worlds learned to appreciate the unique perspectives their diverse forms of consciousness brought to shared experiences. The fear of cultural contamination was replaced by excitement about cultural synthesis. Diana's song had proven that unity and diversity were not opposites but complementary aspects of a greater whole. Diana continued to perform and teach for several more years before age finally required her to retire. But her legacy lived on in the countless beings across the galaxy who had learned that consciousness itself was based on dreams and hopes that connected every form of awareness. Her simple acoustic guitar had opened doorways between minds that would never close again. The story ended as it began, with an old human woman and her dreams, but now those dreams had become reality for an entire galaxy that had learned to see past their differences to the universal hopes that made all consciousness possible. Diana Martinez had achieved immortality, not through technology, but through the simple power of music that spoke the language every heart understood.